Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Turning Towards Life. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, and we are here again. And Justin, if I'm right, beginning our 6th year of this. So we've somehow completed 5 years worth of hanging out on a Sunday morning and having these conversations with each other, with all of the people who are listening, you who are listening, and maybe watching. And so as we enter into our 6th year, it's quite an extraordinary, wondrous, and also not very easy to believe thing that we're saying, Justin, and I'm amazed at that. I had a lovely thing yesterday, Justin, where I met somebody who listens to us in person just by chance. And she said, "Oh my goodness, it's so nice to meet you. I listen to almost every episode." And I'm just so glad to say hello. We just literally said hello. And it was just a reminder again of the loveliness of doing this, and that there are multiples of people out there who are with us. And I met one of them actually in body, and it was really beautiful yesterday. And I want to say thank you, Justin, as always, for choosing the sources that you choose, and for their always kind of, it seems like a certain kind of source works for this. And so whenever I read them, I kind of also get, in part, the reason, not the kind of content reason that you've chosen them, but the reason of them being the kind of thing we would enjoy talking about together. So I really appreciate that happens each time I read a source that you bring. And I just want to, just say again how grateful I am to be here and to be in this wonderful conversation.
It's making me laugh because I just thought that the alternative would be Lizzie and Justin choose random stuff that they happen to bump into during the week.
We should try it. See what happens.
Try it.
Yeah.
So it's not random, although who knows sometimes how these things fall into our laps or come into our hands. Or I'm so lovely to hear that you met someone who listens. I had a conversation this week with someone I know who may well be listening to this, who said how often he's been listening and what an impact these conversations have been having, and it's on him. And it's such a glorious reminder, I think, of ways in which we humans can be of benefit to one another, which I know is what we're trying to do, both for you and for I, but also for everyone else, Lizzie, that this is of benefit. And gosh, in the last week or two, I've been waking up in the morning with very little clue about who I am or what I'm really up to, or things that have felt certain, feeling uncertain, and finding myself without ready answers to many questions that I thought I had answers to, which would be guiding paths. And this is one place of return for me, being with you, being with everyone who's with us, and then talking together in a way about things that matter at sufficient depth, with joyfully and at sufficient depth together, when I don't know what else to do or where else to turn, or even what to say or think or feel about anything. Coming back into this is incredibly helpful. And I was laughing at myself this morning, and I know this is what this source is also about, of course, when we read it in a moment. I was laughing this morning that I think when I embarked upon many of the things that I've taken up as path or practice in my life in my mid-30s, I sort of imagined that this would lead me to answers about life. Somehow life would become, I would do this, I'd do coaching, and then eventually would teach it, and then somehow there would be answers and it would be clear. And exactly the opposite is happening, and it's very disorientating, and so I'm feeling very grateful for relationship and conversation and togetherness and openness and listening and repetition as well, when answers seem to be in increasingly short supply. So that's all my way of saying thank you, Lizzie, to you, for it really is a thing. We sort of talked about it last week, but it's very present with me this week. 5 years of conversation, and here we are entering our 6th. What a gift. that's really come out of committing to something.
Yeah.
That's also really with me this morning, is how what we're prepared to commit to, the scale of what we're prepared to commit to comes back, the way it folds back. So this source, for everyone, all of you who are with us, you can always find the source. We have a Facebook group, Turning Towards Life, and if you join it, you can also join us live on a Sunday morning if you wish, and you can also join in the conversation. So it's there. And if you're on the podcast, or maybe on our lovely Turning Towards Life website, or you found us on Spotify, or who knows where, you can always find the source with the episode as well. This is from Francis Weller, and it goes like this. Repetition is a form of sustained attention, returning us repeatedly to a place, a person, or a practice that engenders depth and familiarity. It is in the very essence of repetition that we come to know something more intimately, whether a partner, a friend, or our own interior worlds. Any movement toward depth requires repeated contact. Gary Snyder, Zen poet and nature philosopher, wrote that getting intimate with nature and our own wild natures is a matter of going face to face many times. Repetition is a form of courtship. Under the fevered pitch of individualism and the heroic ego, the original practices that wove the individual and the community together have been largely forgotten. Consequently, the ritual of life is reduced into the routine of existence. That is repetition without soul. That is the drone of addiction. That is repetition that deadens. We live in an ongoing tension between forgetting and remembering. Nearly all enduring cultures develop practices designed to help us remember three central things: who we are, where we belong, and what is sacred. Prayer, meditation, and ritual are at root designed to help us stay awake. These practices serve to sustain the ground of remembrance, which is in turn a form of permanence. Soulful repetition is not boring or bland. It is musical, rhythmic, and enduring. We require touchstones of return to stay connected to what matters to soul and culture. Ultimately, repetition is a gesture of affection, of fidelity. We return again and again to tend what it is we love, and by so doing, we keep it alive and vital.
We live in an ongoing tension between forgetting and remembering. Nearly all enduring cultures developed practices designed to help us remember three central things: who we are, where we belong, and what is sacred. Prayer, meditation, and ritual are at root designed to help us stay awake. These practices serve to sustain the ground of remembrance, which is in turn a form of permanence. Soulful repetition is not boring or bland. It is musical, rhythmic, and enduring. We require touchstones of return to stay connected to what matters to soul and culture. Ultimately, repetition is a gesture of affection, of fidelity. We return again and again to tend what it is we love, and by so doing, we keep it alive and vital.
I'm really loving this morning this distinction that Francis Weller makes between repetition that deadens, the routine of existence, and repetition that is a courtship, or intimacy, or faithfulness, or coming face to face, or a gesture of affection, or remembering who we are, where we belong, what's sacred. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I think for many of us, our wider culture tells us that repetition is boring. And actually, there are many, many kinds of repetition that our culture has made that are boring because they're empty of this kind of remembrance or this kind of intimacy. And it's just been when is it, Sunday morning, and and many Jewish people are right in the middle of the Jewish New Year festivals, which go on for nearly 2 weeks. And over the 10 days up until Wednesday, it was Rosh Hashanah, which is New Year, and then Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and a bridge in between. And in that time, I have been involved, and many around me have been involved in hours and hours and hours of repetition. We've come back into the same words and the same melodies that we've done every year. And inside each of the different practices of the services over this time are many kinds of repetition inside them as well. And I'm finding myself feeling very, very, very grateful for repetition in that way, when it comes with love for what it does to bring us home and to bring me home. And I really wanted to bring this to us for the beginning of our 6th year, because you and I, Lizzie, and obviously all the people who travel along with us, listening and in other ways joining in, are engaged also in a very real and alive, musical, rhythmic, enduring, affectionate, faithful kind of repetition, which is we keep coming back and saying, we'll sit together and we'll take a source and we'll see what happens and we'll stay present. And it never feels boring or bland or flat or repetitive to me. It's this practice is a doorway into contactfulness, and what I find is a feeling exactly what Francis Weller says, belonging and the sacred, and also remembering. I can speak for me, but I imagine this extends to you and way beyond, remembering who we are. Last thing to say about it is I notice how the wider cultural forces around us, which have been largely dismissive of this kind of practice, and even where this kind of practice does exist, a lot of sort of meditation practice or well-being practice, whatever, turns into trying to get something, like a thing to market. If you do this, you will then feel excellent, or you will be wise, or you'll be strong, which is actually the opposite direction to the returning for its own sake. That a lot of our wider culture really does not help us with returning to ourselves. It would much, much, much rather we went away from ourselves. And I suspect because it's a good way to make money, it's a good way to keep people from really telling the truth about themselves. It's so somehow I think this matters way, way, way more than us as individuals. This return to soul and culture matters. It seems to me as a sort of matter of principle about how we might or might not choose to live.
Yeah, as you're talking, Justin, I'm thinking about the things that we repeat in service of what arises inside the repetition. So you were talking about the current festivals that you're in at the moment, and there's lots of things that get repeated, but I'm imagining there are inner experiences that aren't repeated. It's like your response to what's happening, you're a different Justin every year it happens. And every song happens differently for you because who you are is shifted. And so there's something about the kind of the bits that are stable and repeated, providing the container into which we can know ourselves, like we can experience ourselves. And it's just reminding me of in the days before I was giving birth to Vesper, this person said to me, walk around the block in exactly the same way every day, in exactly the same pace and the same route, a very short walk, so that you can tell the difference between yourself on those days, and you'll see progress. There'll be, days where you'll walk and it's just fine, and then suddenly there'll be a day where you think, oh God, that was too hard, or I can't really walk normally as I would do. And so it's like a way of was a way of finding myself and what was happening, when it can all feel quite like no man's landy. You know, Justin, you were talking about this feeling of, I can't really remember your words, but I'm relating to it, so I'll just use my words, of where you think you were doing something in service of knowing something, or feeling more secure or something, and the very opposite happens, which it's the thing that you're doing undoes everything, and then you're like, I don't know what anything is anymore. I don't know what I'm for. I don't know what the world is. And in those kind of transitional places, it's such an excellent and extraordinary thing to have these kind of places that are repeated, and which provide like some kind of foundational something to hang on to in the maelstrom of unknowing and uncertainty. And those things, it's not like they're things to hang on to so that we don't let go or we don't surrender to it, but they're ways of reminding us that we're here and that there's ground, and that it's actually, what's happening is okay. Like, we can rely on these soul repetitions to be a light in the dark, or the ground to stand on when it feels like there is none. And I've been having a similar week, Justin, of literally going, I'm not sure if I even know how to have a conversation about anything. I don't know what anything is. You know, we've got some family health things that are going on that, for somebody in our family, I think death is probably really near, and it's been very quick, and we're very shocked, and we're wandering through uncertain waters every day and taking each day as it comes. And somehow that is turning me into someone who feels very reliant on these soul repetitions, because the road isn't the road anymore, and the reference points aren't what they were, and it feels like the very ground I'm standing on is, I don't know, jelly or something. And so to feel this kind of, well, to be in this kind of remembrance, and to be in this rhythm of our lives, Justin, and to notice all of the other rhythms of my life, like making a cup of tea and bedtime and a bath and watering a plant and being in communion with people who matter to me in regular ways, which thankfully I have as kind of pillars of support in my life. That feels like the only thing that's really making sense. And everything else feels profoundly questionable. What even is that? So I'm feeling this, you know, Francis Weller uses the word touchstone, and I'm feeling the touchstoneness of this, and how it really matters that those moments of no man's land, of not knowing whether you're coming or going, they don't get buried or pushed away. And somehow these touchstones mean that doesn't have to happen. So whatever's wanting to get born out of our uncertainty and our unknowingness and our lostness and our confusion could still get born, because we're not pushing it away and denying that it's there, and or just doing something to avoid it. I mean, there are probably loads of avoidance as well, but there's a way of staying in contact with it, so that what's trying to establish itself maybe still has a chance. And that's why this soul repetition feels so crucial to me, because if this wasn't here, I might very well turn my back on the possibilities that are opening up, and the opportunities for loving and deepening and being changed by my life. I'm much more likely to stay present to those if I have these touchstones, and I can keep talking and finding my way through it in relationships that are safe and trusting and warm and open and curious about me rather than fearful about me and needing me to be organized about my life or something.
What's happening in me as I'm listening to you talking, lots of things, but particularly as you've been talking about the shaky ground that you find yourself standing on because of what's going on among people close to you, is this remembering that there really is absolutely nothing to stand on always. In one way, like so many of the attempts we make to make the world feel certain and ordered and predictable and like it makes sense in some way that could be straightforward, fall apart when we come up against illness and death, or when we come up against our own confusion, or I mean, in a way, nothing even very big has to happen sometimes for us to be in contact with this. Sometimes it is finding out that we will die, which is so hard to really keep close. Or sometimes it's waking up in the morning and feeling like I don't know who I am and what I'm up to and how anything that I thought made sense makes sense. And at those moments are the moments that we can either really lose ourselves or really feel untethered, or we can fall prey, I suppose might be one word, to the sort of the sense that something will give us the answer. And so we flail around trying to get the answer, and it's ultimately also very dispiriting when we find out that we can't, that product I bought or that course I went on or the whatever it was didn't resolve this fundamental sense of groundlessness that there is. But soul repetition, I really want to pick up this line from Gary Snyder because it was so strong in what you were saying, Lizzie, of going face to face many times, whether that's face to face with others, which I think is a wonderful thing to find a way to do, or face to face with the trees in a local park, or face to face with the pavement around the block, as a form of courtship and a gesture of affection. It seems to me that there's so much in there that in the midst of all of the unknown and the unknowability, that kind of coming back to tend what we love and keeping it alive and vital, that might be the one thing we could ever stand on. And we could stand on it. It seems to me we can stand on it in the midst of pretty much anything, whatever else is going on. And one of the big troubles that we have is that in our wider culture, because so many of those practices came from the religious and spiritual communities, and we've sort of pulled apart those by saying it's irrational and it doesn't add up scientifically or something. We've pulled apart a lot of our contact with the sort of sacred simplicity, and we've also pulled us apart. What's I think really tragic about it is we've pulled apart our contact with practices that people worked out over thousands of years that would do this for us, and we've gone, let's have, and there's good reasons why we've done that too. In some ways, we've pulled apart hierarchies and power structures and all kinds of things. But I'm really mindful of how difficult it is for each of us to work that out on our own, and how much we need one another. And so when somebody said to you, you could walk around the block every day and just notice, use it as an opportunity to find yourself and to see yourself, and to walking around the block may itself not be a practice rooted in a deep specific tradition, but it came in relationship with another person. You didn't just have to invent it, you didn't have to make it up. And also walking as a practice of return and a practice of remembering and a practice of fidelity and intimacy, and going face to face with ourselves and the world has existed for millennia. That's why pilgrimages happen. And obviously talking to one another like we're doing now. I think for me, sitting face to face with you and not knowing what conversation we're going to have, but knowing that we can be faithful to sitting together and having some words that come from another. I suppose I'm sort of really musing on the role of one another in this. So for us, not just you and me having this conversation now, but that Francis is with us too. That this isn't, we don't just sit down and see what there is to say, which would be a very rich practice in itself. There is something for me that happens here, that the flow of life that comes through others also gets to enter into this. And I'm just thinking about all the times I've tried to have practices that I've kind of really been on my own. I'll be a very good meditator, or and how rarely that actually produces this kind of going face to face, this love and fidelity. Very often it's just like I'm trying really hard because somebody told me that meditating would be good, The being in relationship, like the three-way relationship we're in here, and then it's also 100-way or 1,000-way or a 10,000-way because people listen to us and this gets spread. See how much I long for that and how much I think it matters.
Yeah, what's so strongly with me as you're talking, Justin, is this kind of heritage that we've lost of the eldership that's gone before us. So Francis Weller is someone whose wisdom and brilliance we're welcoming into our lives. And there are so many ways that is profoundly important to receive what's here already in order to learn and grow and be supported in our lives. And I went to a small little wedding party yesterday, and I was talking to somebody about practices around child, what do we call it, like parenting in the early times, and how most mothers are kind of thrown out of birth into, oh gosh, I hadn't thought about this bit. I have no idea how to do this. And so many people, or it's more like a kind of cultural soup of suggestion that our babies should be in different beds than us and that we should make them independent as soon as possible. And there's just so much kind of hearsay about what you're supposed to do and the kind of pressures of them sleeping through the night. And everybody talks about sleep when you have a baby or whatever. And I've read some beautiful, beautiful books that are completely, almost entirely marginalized around before, not very long ago in history. Of course, everyone shared beds because that's how you kept warm and that's how you kept alive, was to sleep in the same bed as one another. And somehow all of these things have happened where that kind of ordinary, really straightforward wisdom, and any mum who's got a new baby will be in some kind of struggle around sleep and concern and all of those things that happen. And there's literally nowhere giving us permission to do the thing that's easy, to do the thing that's natural, to do the thing that's warm, to do the thing that's just right there. Like the most obvious thing is kind of been marginalized. And I feel it so keenly, being a mum of a small one, how really important kind of age-old wisdom doesn't find its way to you in your most vulnerable moments. It didn't find its way easily. Well, it did find its way easily to me because people in my family have gone before me. But when then I would venture into the world and meet other people who were in the same position as me, I then became the kind of subject of like, what? You're doing what? You're allowing your child to sleep near you all the time because they want you. I mean, what are you going to create? It's like, it's a very interesting world that we meet when we do what's straightforward and natural. And for me, it's around this kind of loss of eldership in the world, loss of that ordinary, straightforward wisdom that's been kind of, like you said, we've not only thrown out some really important practices from cultures and religions and all of that kind of thing, which, as you said, obviously have good reason too, but lots of things have been lost in that weren't the thing that was the problem. And likewise, I feel in that realm as well of just the ordinary practices of having a baby, like it's happening all the time, everyone's doing it, and yet it doesn't really get talked about that much. It's like so much has been scientificized and medicalized, and just the ordinary, like even like when you read things and they say, oh no, well that hasn't been proven, so no, we can't say that, it hasn't been scientifically proven. Well, what if it's in like stories from millennia of every mother? Why is that less valuable than a scientific journal about it? Like the stories, for me, the stories of other mums who've found ways to find ease and joy in and enjoying being a parent feel like gold to me as a human being, whereas a scientific journal on whether or not something works, and it's like, oh, that feels thin and reductionist, and it lacks kind of quality and richness that really means something in the very human situations we find ourselves in. So I feel like somehow things have got devalued that are profoundly golden, and part of that is that we haven't got these kinds of repetitions that support wisdom flowing from generation to generation, which really, really matter.
So it's as we've been talking, so particularly as you've been talking just now, this very strong thread that was also alive in me and you has come alive in new ways in the words that you say about what we've stripped away about meaning and belonging and wisdom, and that science gives us a very particular kind of wisdom about very particular things, and thank goodness for it, but it doesn't tell us about everything, and it certainly doesn't tell us about meaning. It doesn't tell us about meaning and care and belonging, affection, fidelity. It can't tell us about these things. Its very premise is that it can tell us nothing about these things. And so these sort of twin mistakes of saying that we can only tell if something is true when it belongs in the scientific method immediately writes out huge swathes of human life that cannot be touched by it. And then we've also got this really strong thread that has been in the world, grew up in the cultures of the West over the last 250 years, which is we're all on our own, we're all separate, we're all individual. Our individualism and our individualness and our separateness is the most important thing. You better just get with it, because there's nothing that binds us, and there's nothing meaningful, and there's no other in creation. There's no in existence. We've written all of those. They're both part of the same process, which is why the sort of the privatization of practice as well. I'm really sitting with my meditation attempts, which have been sometimes in attempts to be a better person, and have been so hard, and so instead of a way to belong, or a way to receive wisdom, or a way to be connected, or a way to know myself as part of something bigger, all of which my Jewish community and practice, of course, addresses. And I'm coming to experience, to really experience this thing that you said earlier that I didn't pick up on, and that the repetition also is a place in which I get to unfold in new ways inside the midst of the repetition. But it's possible to pass down wisdom about sleeping arrangements in a way that meets the world as it is today. It doesn't require us to be the people of 2,000 years ago. It can allow us to be the ones that we are now. And I'm left with also a line. There was a line that I caught in our Yom Kippur morning liturgy, which talked about the vibrance or vitality of the young, and then the splendor of the old. And And I was thinking about how rarely we talk about the splendor of old people. We talk about the decrepitude of old people, or the trouble of old people, or the isolation of old people, or the cost of old people, or but the splendor of the old, and what we might learn about this from elders, and also how we might become elders too. That the project of growing into being elders, ones who can pass on participate in and pass on wisdom and practices of intimacy, repetition, faithfulness, fidelity, love. That feels to me, as we're coming towards an end, like a really life-giving kind of call.
Oh, thank you, Justin. This is so what is it? I feel relaxed and met and welcome and hopeful, and like it doesn't matter that there isn't any ground today. But it's just okay that we're all, in whatever ways, uncertain. And thank you to Francis Weller for being so excellent at writing things down. That is his eldership and wisdom being bestowed on all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Well, thank you, everyone, for being with us. It's time for us to end. And being well, we will be here again in another week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.